All right, well, good afternoon, man. Hey, I want to say one thing about the books when you go in the back. By the way, we've given out 100,000 of those to active duty troops. So it doesn't matter if you guys buy them or not, we're giving them away. So, and what I always want to say when I'm at these events, if you want a book and you can't afford one, then go to the table and just tell the person at the table, and it's on me. I'd rather you have the book than have your money. That's not what it's about. So that's just the extension for me. And I hope you guys enjoy it. The book is being made into a movie, which is actually sounds exciting, but it's terrifying. They just casted Kevin Hart to play me, so. Yeah, so no, it's probably the end of 2020. It should be out, and hopefully it'll hold the title an unfair advantage. But definitely, you guys keep an eye out for it. But this is awesome. I always think it's amazing to pull up to a men's event and you see Jeeps and 4x4 trucks and work trucks and Harley Davidsons. It's just so cool at a men's event. But I do have to ask, who drove the Prius? Yeah. Did your wife let you borrow it or something? I'm just joking. I know it gets great gas mileage, but you still look like a lady driving it. Guys, before we get started, I want to thank Pastor Joe and Pastor Trevor for the kind invitation to be here with you guys tonight. It really is inspiring to me that so many men would gather together on Friday night, not just for sakes, but come to be intentional about their walk with God and being the men that God called them to be. And a lot of other men in this community are out other places, and they could be here, and they're not, but you're here now, and so I thank you for that. I want to start off with a story from my time in Afghanistan. I had a really unique opportunity in the military. I was a Force Reconnaissance Marine, which is special operations in the Marine Corps, and I even beyond that, I got to try out for what's called the JSOC Task Force, a Joint Special Operations Command Task Force, which was a Navy SEAL-led task forse. I was one of only 6 Force Recon Marines that got to go there, and my job was a little different. I was called an AFO, Advanced Force Operator, that really goes out kind of like an undercover policeman and works with the local nationals and goes out and facilitates the operation in advance. And so this particular day I want to tell you about, I was with one other team member. He was a SEAL, and we were in civilian clothes. We both had big beards, and we were kind of dusty, and we were in a Toyota Prado, which is like a Toyota 4Runner. We each had a weapon, but just a pistol kind of tucked away, so definitely not looking to get in any kind of military conflict. We were driving on I think it's a picture here, give you an idea of kind of what we look like, the first picture in the slide, and I'm kind of hanging here. There we go. Okay, I'm the one without the square sunglasses on. So so that's kind of what we look like on a normal daily basis working there. And so we're in a Toyota Prado, again, like a Toyota 4Runner, and we're driving in the eastern side of the city of Kabul, which is the capital of Afghanistan, on a road called Jalalabad Road. If anybody's in the military has been to Afghanistan, you've probably been on Jalalabad Road. And so it's a main road that goes into that capital city. And as I was driving, I looked in my rearview mirror, and I saw a Hilux pickup truck, which is a Toyota pickup truck, usually driven by military special forces or the Taliban. And the guys that were in this truck looked like they were the Taliban. I mean, they had big beards, tribal clothing on, they were dusty. They all had AK-47 assault rifles. We even seen one RPG, a rocket-propelled grenade launcher. And there was a lot of them piled in this truck. To give you an idea how many were in there, we always had a joke that we'd say, how many Taliban can you fit in a pickup truck? So the answer is one more. Right? They pile in this thing, they're hanging out the sides, and we're like, man, I hope they're not following us. And so I did this technique called deviating your route. So I'm on Jalalabad Road, and I took a right off the road and began to make the block. And as I'm making the block, they're continuing to follow us. When I got back to my original route, I turned right again, and they did in fact turn behind us. So this lets me know they are in fact following us, but it also lets them know that I know that they are following us, which started a chase. And they start chasing us and pursuing us very closely and aggressively. I made a decision to go into the city of Kabul because I knew the city really well. I didn't live on a base. I lived in that city. And so I thought I could lose them through the traffic. Now, I know y'all think that there's no traffic worse than Philly traffic. I've witnessed it today. It's pretty bad. But it has nothing on third world traffic, nothing on Kabul traffic, right? There's no stoplights. There's no street signs. There's so many cars. It's overpopulated. The third world traffic is just horrendous. And so I was stuck in this traffic trying to get away from these guys and banging cars trying to get through. And I got to this major intersection called Masood Circle. And as I got to Masood Circle, the traffic began to congest and stop. And all of a sudden I didn't have anywhere to go. Somehow this truck managed to get around us, get about 20 yards in front of us and cut us off in a roadblock situation. And I remember real clearly in my mind. I remember a few guys jumping out of the back, but probably my most vivid memory is the passenger door opening, and the passenger stepped out. It was very clear he was in charge. He had an AK-47 rifle in one hand. In his other hand, he held up to me and made eye contact with me and gave me a hand signal to stop my vehicle. It's a real bad situation. And in my training experience, this is called being stuck on the X. The X is it's an ambush site, a kill zone. A couple of things you learn in training about the X is, number one, you have to be able to identify that you're on the X. Right? You got to know you're in a bad situation. You got to be aware that you're in trouble. Number two, you have to get off the X, right? You got to move. If you stay there, something bad's going to happen. It's kind of simple logic. If you stay there, something bad's going to happen. You need to move. And so I'm so thankful for military training because we actually trained for this scenario before. Every year we come to Bill Scott Raceway in Virginia and do driving training and crash cars and have fun. And you know, it was just a great time, not thinking you'd ever really use this. And this was a roadblock situation. I had to execute a ramming technique. I did it before. So I hit the gas and aimed my vehicle towards theirs. Probably my favorite memory of Afghanistan is when I smashed into that truck and it spun out of the way, was seeing little Taliban guys fly out the back of the pickup truck through the air, and it knocked that truck right out of the way. And when I hit it, it left like this perfect, let's like this aisle, like this perfect pathway to get off that intersection. And as I started driving off, there was one more obstacle. There was like this 100-year-old policeman. He had his uniform all perfect and his whistle. And this is like probably his whole life was owning this intersection. That was his whole career, was probably this intersection. And so he's not going to let me off. He's blowing his whistle. He's like, beep, beep, trying to stop me. And there was no way I was stopping. I was going to run him over to get out of there. And the great thing about Afghans, the reason they've survived thousands of years of war, they always jump on a winning team. And he saw I was going to run him over. And so he jumped on my team. He started blowing his whistle, stopping cars, directing traffic, and actually saved the day and got me off that intersection that day. And, you know, I don't know what those guys wanted. I have a pretty good idea, but I don't know exactly what those guys wanted. But I do know this. If we would have stopped on Masood Circle that day, if we would have stopped on the X, we would have put up a heck of a fight. But the truth is, we probably would have been killed or taken. Now, I'm here today to tell you that you don't have to go to Iraq or Afghanistan to find yourself on the X. Every man in this room right now has been in moments in their life where they found themselves stuck on the X. Maybe some of you are on it tonight. There would come to points in our life where we don't think if we're going to find ourselves on this X in our life, but when we do, we have to ask ourselves, what are we going to do? In the ministry I do, I'm in full-time ministry working with combat veterans who are struggling with things like post-traumatic stress disorder, deciding if they want to live or die. All these issues they deal with combat trauma, essentially stuck on the X. I really learned through the work that I do, it comes down to one thing. That's a choice that we make to decide if we want to stay on the X's in our life and die, either literally or metaphorically, or get off that X and move forward in the very lives that we were created to live. Now, sometimes I say that and people think, well, it's really not that easy. And it can't be that easy. Well, if it isn't that easy, then why don't we just do it sometimes? Why don't we just make the decision to step in the very lives and the will of God and the lives that we were created to live? The Bible has some amazing illustrations of this, and one of my favorites in the book of Exodus, where God makes a promise to the Israelites to take them from multiple generations of slavery and bondage and lead them into the promised land. This begins through a promise, a conversation that God has with Moses in the wilderness, and God tells Moses, I heard the prayers of my people, and I'm going to set them free. And Moses, I'm going to use you to do it. Now, Moses didn't feel qualified. I don't think he even wanted to do it, but the thing about Moses in this situation was he was obedient. And sometimes we don't feel qualified. Sometimes we don't want to do things. But if we could just be obedient to what God calls us to do, we could be world changers. And that's what happened to Moses this day. God calls him to do something, and he was obedient to do it. And so Moses goes to Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, Pharaoh's over 1 million slaves, over 1 million Israelite slaves, and he says, hey, God told me to tell you to set these people free. I'm sure Moses laughed. He probably called his friends and, hey, come say that again, Moses. Let's hear what God told you to tell me. Let me think about it. And no, I'm not letting them go. And so Moses, obviously Pharaoh did not let them go. And there's this period that goes by called the 10 plagues. And over that time of the 10 plagues, Pharaoh gets weakened. And Pharaoh finally decides to let the Israelites go. I imagine as the Israelites begin to leave Egypt, they had to be so excited. I mean, one, they were freed from hundreds of years of slavery and bondage. And two, they had a promise from God himself for a new beginning, to be in the promised land and have a brand new start. But at the first sign of hardship, you see their promise from God is forgotten and their faith crumbles as they find themselves stuck on the X. In Exodus 14, it talks about how as the Israelites left Egypt, they found themselves on the bank of the Red Sea. And when they found themselves on the bank of the Red Sea, before they crossed the Red Sea, they decided to stay there for the night. And while they were staying there, something happened. The Bible says that God allowed Pharaoh's heart to be hardened. And so Pharaoh went after them, not with a truck full of Taliban. The Bible says the entire Egyptian army, every horse, every chariot. Pharaoh himself came after them. And the Israelites found themselves caught between the Red Sea and this opposing Egyptian army, and they panicked. In Exodus 14, verse 10, it says, as Pharaoh approached, the Israelites looked up, and there the Egyptians were marching after them, and they were terrified, and they cried out to the Lord. They began to panic and pray out to God. In verse 11, you see Moses step in because they start blaming Moses. That's what we always do when something goes wrong. First we start praying, maybe many of us start praying, we always look for someone to blame, and they started blaming Moses. Verse 11 through 12 says, they said to Moses, was it because there are no graves in Egypt that you brought us out to the desert to die? What have you done by bringing us out of Egypt? Didn't we say to you in Egypt, leave us alone, let us serve the Egyptians? It would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the desert. They were willing to go back to where they came from. Why? Not because God's promise changed, just because it got hard. Now, how many times we feel like God calls us to do something and we're willing to go back exactly where it came from just because it got hard. But Moses didn't forget God's promise, and he reminds them of it. In verse 13, it says, Moses said to the people, do not be afraid, stand firm, and you will see the deliverance of the Lord, which he will bring to you today. The Egyptians who you see today, you will never see them again. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still. But then God speaks. I love this. This is one of my favorite parts of the Bible, when I think God says, stop whining. He doesn't say to keep praying. He doesn't say to be still and wait for a miracle. No, what God says in verse 15 is, then the Lord says to Moses, why are you crying to me? Tell the sons of Israel to move on. I love the King James Version. God tells them to go forward, to move, to get off the X, right? Why are you praying now? If you haven't noticed, the Egyptians, they're coming and they're going to kill you. It's time to go. There's a time to pray. I love praying. I spend a lot of time in prayer. I have a son in Afghanistan right now. I'm praying all the time. There's a time to pray, but it's also a time to trust the promises of God so that we can go forward. Pray, but pray knowing God's promise in our life. So when the day comes and we find ourselves on the X, we don't stop and pray and cry out in fear and hopelessness, but we're able to move forward in faith based on God's promises. Just like God had a promise for the Israelites, he has a promise for each of us, each and every one of us, to lead us from slavery and bondage into freedom. Jeremiah 29:11 says, for I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you a hope and a future. That's a plan for us that God has for us, and it's a good one. And the world's circumstances aren't dictated or do not change God's plan. I wish that I could say up here today to you that I always moved forward when I found myself on the X in life, that I trusted or that I even knew the promises of God, but that's not the case. In 2007, I found myself on the X again. I came home from my eighth and last deployment to Afghanistan. And my wife and I sat before a clinical psychologist, and I was diagnosed with PTSD. I never saw anything like that coming. If I would have heard someone was struggling with those types of things before, I would have thought that person was weak or couldn't hang. But there I was getting diagnosed with this. I was totally blindsided by it. I was embarrassed by it. I didn't want to accept it. And so because of that, I didn't follow those two simple rules. I didn't want to identify my situation, identify the X that I was on because of my pride or shame. And number two, because of that, I couldn't move off the X. I chose to stay there. And I emphasize I chose to stay there for a period of almost 3 years. And it almost cost me everything. My hardships in my life and the whole PTSD thing did not start in Afghanistan. I'm from a 3-generation Marine Corps family. Like I said, I was a Marine. My son Hunter is a Marine in Afghanistan right now. He's actually out on patrol, out patrolling outside of Bagram Air Base right now, as I'm up here. So, but before us was my father. He was a Marine in Vietnam. He was an infantry Marine, and he came home and struggled with a lot of the same things I did, although he didn't get the help. He was a very angry man. He was extremely violent, a lot of alcohol, women throughout his life. And when I say violent, there was a lot of physical abuse in our home. And I don't mean like us getting spanked with a belt. I mean fist to face when we were children, physical abuse. If anybody's ever grown up in a home like that, you know the siblings get really close. And so I had a brother, he was a year older than me, and the two of us really bonded through that. And we would talk as we became a little bit older, 10, 12 years old, we talk about, how we'd escape the lifestyle. When we were 13 and 14 years old, we decided we were going to join the military and have a brand new chance at life and really start over, escape what we were enduring as kids. So we started running, we started swimming, we were in southern Louisiana, so we were in the water all the time. We loved the water and thought, we'd love to do some type of special operations. The whole health scene in Louisiana is not a big deal, but we actually stopped drinking sodas and stuff like that. We were really into it, and we were like holding each other accountable to it. We were really committed at a young age, and for about a year we did that. And about a year into that, my brother was 15 years old, and I was 14 at that time. He was shot and killed, and it was extremely devastating to me. He was the closest person to me in my life at that time, and I went into my family. What I had left of the family went into complete turmoil. My mother, she had a mental meltdown. She could not handle that happening. My father did not want to face that or deal with it or be responsible for it, so he left for a job in Africa, took off overseas, and I went into a very deep isolation. However, in that isolation, I continued to focus on running and swimming and preparing myself for the military. By the time I was 15, I was living with my older sister, so essentially living on my own. And I probably was not going to graduate high school. I was working at the same time, and it just wasn't going to happen without any parental guidance. And so I went to a Marine Corps recruiter named Staff Sergeant Brown, and I told him my story. And for some reason, he had a compassionate heart for me, and he helped me to enlist in the Marine Corps without even a high school diploma. I will forever be thankful for both Staff Sergeant Brown and the Marine Corps for that second chance at life and that opportunity they gave me. I mean, all those years later, I made a promise that I would get my GED my first year in the Marine Corps, and I did. All these years later, I have an MBA. I can't spell it, but I got one. So, but the Marine Corps for me was like that brand new clean slate. And at the young age of 17 years old, I definitely recognized it, and I embraced it. I didn't just want to be a Marine, though. I wanted to be a reconnaissance Marine. And so I tried out my first year. And for those who know much about that job, it's very difficult. There's over 80% attrition rate, and especially at a young age and at the time when I tried out, I was 18 years old. It's very tough to make it, but I did. And I'm so thankful that I did, because those men in that community didn't just teach me and mentor me how to be a recon Marine, but they mentored me how to be a man and how to be an adult. And it really set me up for life. And so I really appreciated that. I wanted to do my job, however. I wanted to go, if anybody's been in the military could probably understand this. When I speak, it's all men, so it's a lot easier. But I wanted to go to combat. When I'm speaking with women all the time, they're like, why would you want to go to combat? That doesn't make sense. And it's like, the only way I know how to explain it to them is like having a really nice dress and you get all dolled up, but you don't have any place to go. Like when you're in the military, you train and train and train. You want to go do what you train to do. And so I had this desire to do that. And unfortunately, it would take quite some time. This was 1993 when I went in, all the way until 2001. And while I got to go and got what I wanted, it came at a high cost. And you guys remember September 11th, 2001, those planes flying the World Trade Center buildings. I was assigned to 3rd Force Recon Company at the time. I remember sitting down in front of a television with my wife watching those planes crash into the building. I knew, me and my wife both knew our life was about to be tragically different. I knew I was going to deploy. I didn't know when, but I knew I was going to, and everyone went to my unit. People weren't going into military units like, oh my gosh, are we going to war? Everyone was like, hey, what's up, sir? Like, when are we going to do this? The military was motivated. Everyone wanted to deploy, and I pushed as hard as I could to get on the first rotation out. It took me almost a year and a half to go, but I got on that JSOC task force, and 8 deployments later, I got exactly what I asked for. When I went to Afghanistan the first time, however, I remember I landed in the middle of the night. I was on Bagram Air Force Base, and it was pitch black outside, and I walked away from everything, and the base was still new, so they had like these HESCO barriers, kind of like these dirt-filled bunkers and some constant steel wire on top. I remember walking out to the end of it, just like the reality of it, trying to take in the reality of it. Like, all this time I've trained, I'm almost 30 years old, been in the military, almost 10 years training to do this, and like now it's just like really happening. This is real. Like, beyond this barrier is like that enemy, the Taliban, that's going to kill me, and and this is really going to happen. And the reality of that made me just start asking myself if I was ready, and I'll be honest with you, I felt very confident that I was ready to do my job. At that point, no fear had really set in or anything. I was really confident. The military talks about resiliency, and nowadays I teach a lot on resiliency. And the resiliency continuum for the military is the 4 pillars of resiliency: mind, body, spirit, social. You got to be mentally tough, You got to be physically tough to do your job. You have to be socially in a strong brotherhood, a good team, and a good network. And you got to be spiritually tough. I didn't really know what the word spiritual really meant, to be honest with you. I thought I was good because I had the word Christian stamped on my dog tag. So I was like checking the box, right? But I really didn't know what that meant. And I tell you, like back then, I took my family to church. We went to church every Sunday. But if I'm being honest with you, man, the reason I took my wife and kids to church was control. If I bring my wife to church every Sunday, well, she's going to be everything that I wanted, that virtuous woman, right? She's going to be faithful. She's going to be loyal. She's going to be this godly woman, and it's going to be really beneficial to me. My kids are going to go to Sunday school, and they're going to get character and discipline, and I'm not going to have to beat them so much. Everything we want to get out of Sunday school for our kids. But like for me, like I wasn't going to engage beyond Sunday. I wasn't going to be on the church softball team. Like I looked at Christian men and believed Christian men were weak. And that's just how I viewed it at the time. And I didn't really understand that we don't have to choose between the two. You see, I thought I had to make a choice. I'm in Afghanistan. I have to do this warrior thing. And now I feel like I have to choose between being a warrior and being a man of God. And so many men in our culture right now outside the military, I believe, are facing that same question every day, where somehow young men feel like they have to choose between masculinity and Christianity. And I wish someone would have told me different or demonstrated, maybe even demonstrated different. But in my mind, Christianity was weak and people of faith were weak. And there was no place for that at that moment in time in my life. I could do that later when I get older. And let me tell you, if I could pause for our message for a second, there is no one more strong on the battlefield of Afghanistan or the battlefield of life than men of God. If not for men of God, then who's going to stand up for the things in this world needs to be stand up for? And I tell you right now, if you look at everything you see in the news, and people are on the news like this shooting and that shooting, and what's the problem? Can we identify the problem? Is it the left or is it the right? What's the problem? The problem is that this country's in a manhood crisis. And men are not learning how to be other men, and men are not being the men that they were created to be. When you start telling men that they can't be who they were created to be, and you start seeing men get led in a way that they're not intended to live, then you're going to have the problems in our culture you're having. I wish someone would have told me that when I was younger, because I made a deliberate decision to say I could do that later when I get older and put God out of my life, and it left a giant hole inside of my heart that over the years I filled with hate and rage and anger and bitterness. Again, I didn't live on a base. I lived in the Afghan community. I lived with these families. I ate dinner with their families. I played soccer with their kids. I heard just stories of who the Taliban was, who the enemy was. And it really didn't take me long at all for me to go from this patriotic military person that wanted to retaliate for 9/11 and right that wrong to being this person that had this just deep compassion for the Afghan people. Because if you want to talk about oppression, like these people truly oppressed. The things that happen to these women and children and the culture what the Taliban does to these people, it's disgusting. And it disgusted me, and it built a hatred inside of me. And I worked in this command that had this Viking mentality and hated the enemy. And that people that hated the enemy the most that I worked with were the other Afghans, the former Northern Alliance guys, the guys that we worked with. They had this deep hatred towards them. And we were in this kind of Viking war culture mentality and very intense. And honestly, in combat, that worked really well. That works really well to have that kind of intensity and aggression towards an enemy. But without any balance, it creates a very toxic environment in your life. Because 24 hours later, when I was this person in Afghanistan, now 24 hours later, I'm back home. My wife's picking me up from the airport, and I have to be a husband, a father, and Mr. Rogers, the friendly neighbor. Like, it just didn't work. Like, I couldn't flip that switch and change. I was still this angry, intense dude. And I'm ashamed to say, I've said it twice today, talking to the policeman, and it shames me every time to say, but it's just a reality. My home was not a very good place for my family. They were not safe in my home. I was a tyrant to them. My wife and kids would walk around on eggshells. They were scared of me. I would throw temper tantrums like a 15-year-old boy that wouldn't get in his way. I'd slam doors. I'd break things. I'd throw things. I'd scream at them like a Marine Corps drill instructor. My wife and my children, I would do this to. I'm supposed to be their protector and their husband, my wife's husband and their father, and they're supposed to feel safe around me. I was tormenting them. And I knew I was getting out of control. There was a few moments that really showed me I was getting out of control. One I could share with you is I came home from Afghanistan, and my little girl was so excited I was going to be home for her birthday that she actually moved her birthday party because Dad was going to be home from Afghanistan. It was a big deal to her. And And she's very opinionated. She still is. She's 21 now, so she's even more opinionated. But it's just her personality. She didn't like the icing on her cake, and she said something about it. And I just flipped out. And I grabbed a handful of my little girl's birthday cake. I picked up my little girl's cake, and I threw it against the wall and destroyed my little girl's birthday. I remember when I did that, I knew I was wrong, and everyone was watching. But if I would have stopped in that moment, then it would have been like an admission of guilt. So it's like that ball was rolling, and I was gonna stand my ground and dig in further, and that's just how I was gonna deal with it. And everyone had to understand that's who I was, and everyone had to deal with it. And so instead of knowing I was wrong, instead of changing that behavior, I just figured I just need to back off and isolate myself from them. And so instead of making those changes, I started volunteering for anything I could do to keep myself busy. If it wasn't for another deployment, it was for training between deployments. My wife is absolutely amazing. If you hear anything about her story, one thing you'll pick up is that she's just absolutely incredible. So I kind of leaned on that and took advantage of that she was not only a great mom, but she was a great dad. Not only was she a great wife, but she was a great husband. She held the fort down when I was gone, so I didn't have to worry about my house or my home or my children. She had that covered. And so it was real easy for me to just stay busy and stay disengaged and figure I could fix all this later on. But right now, I have to be this person. And I was just totally justifying my behavior. And eventually that anger and frustration started turning into anxiety. I didn't know what it was at first, but I started having these physiological manifestations where my forearms would go numb, completely numb. My whole body would start going numb. My cheeks, particularly, my face would start feeling numb. I feel like my throat was swelling shut, like I couldn't breathe. Sometimes I feel like I had like a 1,000-pound weight on my chest, and I was gonna have a heart attack, but I feel like my heart was gonna stop. These are, for those who know, these are early signs of panic attacks. They progress worse to feeling like a complete panic, and you feel like your heart will stop beating, or you're gonna not be able to breathe anymore. I didn't want to say anything to the guys I worked with because I knew if I said something, the guys would think I was weak. I mean, I'm in a little small special operations community. Figured the guys would think I was weak, and that probably wasn't a paranoia. That was probably reality. And I knew if I went to mental health to be seen by a clinician, I'd probably lose my clearance and not be able to do my job anymore. And so knowing these things, I just pushed it down and kept trying to do my job, and it worked for a little while, but those symptoms got worse. It was these moments where during really intense operations to where I had what's called disassociation, to where my mind almost felt like it detached from my body, almost like a bird's eye view of yourself, like if you're playing a video game, except it's real life. You feel like just like you're in a dream, like you're detached from yourself. Then I'd have moments where I'd almost like wake up out of a fog, like snap out of a dream and realize I didn't remember the last couple hours or the last days or parts of the week were real foggy. Then some things started getting much worse. I actually had 12 of my teammates. We were on an operation and they went one way and I went the other way. They were captured, missing for a week, and they were all eventually, we found that they were all killed. And these weren't U.S. service members. They were Afghans. So you may think, oh, that's not the same. To me, it was the same. These guys were my brothers. Like, I lived with them for 3 years. They worked for me. I would have died for these guys, and they would have died for me. And when they were killed, I took it very personal, very hard. I had some other U.S. service members that were killed that worked for me. And things started really to progress. I started having this very imminent sense of doom for myself. I would leave on operations, and I'd write notes to my family. Not like what-if notes, but like notes like I know my family's going to get this. So I'd write, tell my wife that she could move on and remarry, and my oldest son that he would have to take care of the house now and be the man of the house. Like writing these notes to my family, and I put them in the lid of my suitcase because I knew my personal effects would make it home. And I'd come back from the operation and obviously be alive, and I'd take those notes and I'd throw them away because I was paranoid someone would find them. And I'd do it all over again. And so this very imminent state of doom that I was in. And the last operation I was on, I came back from it, and it was 2 weeks, and I was pretty much with only local nationals. And when I came back, I realized that I couldn't remember most of the last 2 weeks. And not only was I putting myself in danger, but now I'm putting other people in danger as well. And so the reality of that made me recognize that I needed to speak up and say something. And when I did, just like I feared, I was brought home, removed from my team. I was sat before a clinical psychologist, and I was diagnosed with severe chronic PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. And on top of that, I was read out of my clearance, so I couldn't do my job anymore. And I was devastated, to say the least. Like, there's two things I was dealing with. One, was I was completely ashamed because this was something I worked my entire life for. Made it to become a recon Marine, made it to Force Recon, made it to JSOC. I'm on this incredible mission. It was like if you played football your whole life and made it to the NFL and made it to Super Bowl, which that would never be me because I'm 5'3". But if I did, right, you can imagine, like that was Super Bowl for me. And I was pulled out in the middle of the game-winning play. And I was devastated. I felt like I let my team down. I felt just completely ashamed. And on top of that, the level of distress and panic my body was in was overwhelming. I felt like I was gonna die at any moment, and the level of panic was so bad, like I didn't wanna take my life or anything at that time, but I wanted to die to make it stop because it just felt so out of control. If I went outside, I felt exposed and vulnerable. If I went inside, I felt like the walls were closing in. Like the only way I know how to describe the level of panic is if like you were in a swimming pool and your ankle was handcuffed to the drain, and like how desperate would you be if you could see the surface, right? How desperate would you be just for one breath of air? You're drowning. But you never drown, you never die. You're like that 24/7. That's how that level of panic I was in. And then the medicine they gave me made me feel worse. It made me feel like my body was shutting down. And so it's just like I couldn't find the solution. So my wife and my counselor, they convinced me to get on the wrestling mats and do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Now I'd say I did it since I was little, but I'm still little. So I did it since I was 5 years old. I started when I was 5 in judo and traditional jiu-jitsu. And so they talked me to get in on those mats. And I'll be honest with you guys, when I got on those mats for the first time, I felt like I found a cure. Because you can't, anybody's ever trained any kind of very engaging martial art or sport, you can't think about Afghanistan and train at the same time, but your buddy's gonna beat you up. You have to be focused. And so it was good for me. But you could have a medicine that's good for you, and you could abuse that medicine as well. That's what I did with this. I took it out of context. I abused it. Don't get me wrong. I still love jiu-jitsu. I train every day almost. I'm a 3rd-degree black belt in Brazilian jiu-jitsu under Carlson Gracie Jr. And ministry, you could ask Pastor Joe, ministry's tough and stressful. So when I have a bad day at the office, I go to the gym and I find some 19-year-old stud, and I choke him out. It's like, I get back to sharing the gospel. Actually, it's a good time. It's a really good time to share the gospel when you're choking someone out. They're about to die. They're pretty receptive. So, but I joke about that. But the truth is that was good for me. But I took it out of its place. I mean, I just dove into that 24/7, and I'd already been fighting professionally. I was already undefeated. I was doing it on the side in the military, and so now I just dove in. Me and my wife opened a school. Within a short period of time, I had 1,000 students in my school, which is huge for a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu school. If you do the math on tuition, you were making a lot of money. And on top of that, I started fighting again, and I immediately had some pretty good success. I won a world title belt. I was ranked number 1 in the U.S. as a flyweight, number 6 in the world. I fought on all the pay-per-views and Showtime and MTV and HDNet. Fought on all the big shows, and I made it to a point of 18-2 as a pro was my finish record. 18 wins and 2 losses. You guys will appreciate this. I'll take a time out and say this. My first loss, I was undefeated for so long. My first loss came by the way of a guy named Zach Makovsky from right here at Philadelphia Fight Factory. So you guys got that over me. But even though it was my first loss, it was my funnest fight. It was the main event of Bellator for the Bellator belt. And Zach Makovsky is, I don't know if he lives here anymore, but he still fights. But that was my first loss. But I had really gained a lot of success on the surface, and it looked like if anybody would looked at my life at that time, with the world title and the school and all these things that were going on, they would have thought, man, this guy's got it all together. But this was just a fake facade of success, because underneath the surface of that was a very broken home and a broken person that was very desperate for help still, but I wasn't getting it, and I wasn't making that choice that we talked about earlier, step off that X and move forward out of that situation. I was choosing to stay there. I had created a system in my life where everyone told me what I wanted to hear, and no one told me what I needed to hear. I had all these people in that gym around me just telling me, lifting me up. And anytime someone would tell me anything that I didn't want to hear, I'd push them out of my life. I had absolutely no accountability. And I'll tell you, there's no more dangerous place for someone to be, particularly for a man to be in this world, more dangerous than any town in Afghanistan or Iraq, for a man to be without accountability in this world. There's no more dangerous place. I was like a train, headed for a brick wall without any brakes. Accountability is the brakes, and I didn't have any. And it was a matter of time before it came crashing down, and it did. I my marriage and family was still falling apart, was still broken. I was still having panic attacks. I was still having sleepless nights. Matter of fact, I don't even know how I functioned as an athlete, because there was nights that I wouldn't even want to sleep because I was scared to close my eyes because of what I dream about, what I'd see when I close my eyes. So my wife and I would say, my wife and I many nights would sleep alone. Like I'd sleep in the gym or at a friend's house or in a kid's room. Probably the loneliest place, my wife and I would say we ever been is not away on deployment in Afghanistan, but in our own bed with our backs turned towards each other in a dead marriage. That's where our marriage was. We just both felt that way. And it didn't take long with the attention you get from being in a sport to get attention from other women. And so I started having relationships with other women, and then it turned into a full-blown affair. I didn't even really care if my wife found out at the time, to be honest with you. I was just so callous and had no empathy. When she found out, it was just, I had no emotion to it. And we sat our family down and told them how we would get divorced and how everything was going to be better. Right? You're not going to have to hear the fighting anymore. You're not going to have to deal with the drama anymore. You're going to get 2 Christmases. Like everything all the parents tell their kids to try to justify divorce instead of fighting through it. And so that's where we sat there and I tried to sell my kids that lie. I remember my kids being devastated. It wasn't going to be better for them. They were devastated. And they were crying, and I actually cried with them, and my wife cried with them, and we all held each other together, and we cried together, and we decided to do it anyway. We sold our home. My wife filed papers for divorce. We signed 2 separate leases for 12 months each in apartments. And so needless to say, we were very committed to this decision. My wife and I, however, had 2 very different reactions. My wife went into a church. I don't think, and she'll say this, but I don't think she went into a church to try to go to God or to in a situation or for God to save our marriage. What she went into church for, she wanted to be in a healthy environment. She didn't want to be around people that were toxic. She wanted to be around people that would be encouragement to her. So she knew the best place to find that was in a church community, a church like this one. I mean, I could see interacting with this church, just such a great community church, and that's what she found. And she would go in there, and people told me she wouldn't just go on Sundays. They were telling me she was going there almost every day to be around these people. And every time I stand on a pulpit or a stage anywhere, I always could look to that left side of the wall, back where Pastor Joe's sitting, because that's where they tell me she would stand. They said she would try to stand there and pray against that wall, and she would collapse praying. And of course, I've asked her since, how could you be praying for me when I was doing this to you? When I was betraying you this way, like in the most grotesque way a husband could betray their family, how could you be praying for me? And she said she would pray, God, let me see Chad the way you see Chad. God, let me love Chad the way you love Chad. God, let me forgive Chad the way you forgave Chad. That's what this woman would pray for me when I was doing this to her. And meanwhile, I'm off within days, bachelor pad, decorated out. I look back, and the word shameful doesn't even fit as I look back to that, because it was actually disgusting. I put my family pictures in my closet because girls would come over. That's where my focus was. I'm like, I don't have to deal with this woman anymore. She never understood me anyway. Kind of trying to put that on her. The reason I'm not getting past this is because she didn't understand. Just pinning it all on her. And I was signed up for a fight on Strikeforce. If anybody's a big MMA fan, you remember Strikeforce. It was on Showtime. This was a real big fight. It's probably one of the biggest fights of my career. And I was fighting a guy named Roberto De Leon, and all my focus was on beating Roberto De Leon. He was a real popular up-and-coming kid, and they wanted him to, I think the organization wanted him to beat me. And I was undefeated and just really just focused my energy and attention to that fight, training for that fight, the media around it, and just really not being responsible or dealing with this separation from my family. And I remember when that fight happened, this was like, if anybody's an athlete or anybody's like a true fighter, this is the kind of fight you want to be part of. Because all my 18 wins, I have 17 submissions, and then this one fight was a decision. This was my Rocky fight. We beat the heck out of each other. I knocked him down, he knocked me down, I kicked him in the face, knocked his mouthpiece out. It was back and forth all the way through. And when they were going to call, the judges were calling the fight, I didn't know who was going to win. I was worried, man, you left it to the judges. I remember when they called my name and raised my hand, though, the relief I felt off, because the fight was over and I won. My hand's raised, and I'm in this arena, 10,000 people in there cheering. And as I'm sitting there, it was almost like everything kind of just stopped, and it got quiet, and I thought, it was just this weird moment to where I thought, wait, Kathy's not here. Like she had been at all my fights before. She was like my cheerleader before. And she wasn't there, and it felt so out of place that she wasn't there. And I thought, man, I just fought like so hard, like knocking each other down, how tenacious I was fighting for one more win on my stupid record. Meanwhile, my wife and children are somewhere out there, in a state of brokenness. And it really convicted me in that moment. And I remember like not even being excited about the win. I actually left the place by myself. I went back home to my apartment. And after a fight like that anyway, your mind's spinning. You can't just go to sleep. So I started thinking. My mind started spinning. And thinking, man, like I blamed everyone for everything my whole life. Like my father from my childhood, still mad at my dad, mad at my mom, like mad at everyone, mad at people in the military, my wife, like everyone's an idiot. That was my attitude about everything. Everyone's an idiot. And it's true, right? There's a lot of idiots out there, let's be honest. But in this situation, like I was the common denominator. Like all these people that said with the problem was me. And when I realized that, instead of saying the problem's me, I need to fix the problem, I said I need to eliminate myself from the situation because, these people don't deserve this. And so this thought came over me that my family would be sad without me, but they would be better off. My family would be sad, but they would be better off. If you guys don't know, that same hopeless thought finds a home in the hearts of 20-plus veterans every single day, every day. That somehow my family, my loved ones, my friends, they could be sad without me, but they're going to be better off. The world's going to be a better place without me. And so I decided I was going to take my life. And it wasn't an idea at this point. I had thought about it before. I had thought about maybe this would be better just to die. Or if I'm driving down the road, maybe I pull my steering wheel and hit a tree or something. I thought about it before. But like in this moment, like I decided, I'm taking my life. This is what I'm doing. I'm not telling anyone. I'm not crying out. I'm not going to give any signs. I'm just going to do it. And I had a Glock 22 pistol. I was sitting in my closet. I had my pictures of my family. I put them on the floor because, again, they were in my closet. And I tried to build up the courage. And I've been around guns a lot. I've seen what guns could do. And so I knew what that line was, and I knew what would happen. And I tried to put that gun against my mouth, up to my mouth. I put it against my head, and I tried to build up the courage to cross that line and to pull that trigger. But I don't know to this day if I had the courage to do it, because I didn't. But I can tell you that every time I pushed that gun to my head, the first thought that would come to my mind was I was almost imagining, like visualizing who would find me and how that would play out. And I knew the only person that had a key to my apartment was my son Hunter, the one that's in Afghanistan right now. He's the only other one with the key. And so that would make me pump the brakes on doing it. Nonetheless, I would still try. The next day, it would start over again. I would try to build myself up again. And I don't remember this. My wife said we had this, I had a frantic phone call with her, and that led her to come to my apartment. And when she did, she knocked on the door, and I was in that closet with my pistol. She inevitably and unwillingly saved my life. Because when she knocked on the door, I wasn't going to answer it, but she announced herself verbally. And when she announced herself verbally and I heard her voice, she would have never came in my closet. This was my apartment. She would have never came in there. So I don't know why I did this. When I heard her voice, I panicked and I hid that pistol under a blanket, like a little kid getting caught doing something wrong. I must have been so ashamed. I hid that pistol. I answered the door, and we got in this argument. And in the argument, she asked me a question that radically changed my life. It's why the question she asked me is why I'm here tonight, and I don't mean speaking. I mean, that's why I'm here on this planet tonight. She asked me how I could do everything I did in the Marine Corps. I mean, we met when we were 17 and 18 years old. She saw me become a recon Marine. She would come visit me at BRC. She saw me do all these crazy military schools and trainings and work up for Afghanistan, and she was aware of some of the things we were doing in Afghanistan. Like, she saw me have this life of discipline and some professional success. She saw the MMA fights, like training, banged up, broken, fighting, sparring with guys bigger than me, like just the grind that it would take to get through that, and the cutting the weight, losing like 35 pounds, like looking like skin and bones, like the discipline it takes to do all that stuff that she witnessed through all those years. She's like, how could you do all of that? And when it comes to your family, you'll quit. Now, I don't know about the rest of you men, but there's no more soul-cutting word to me than to be called a quitter. And she was absolutely right. I had been successful professional things in my life. When it came to the most important thing, being a husband, being a father, being that young 17-year-old kid that raised his hand and said, I want to do something important with my life, I quit on all those things, including my own health and even my own will to live. And it was time for me to make a decision to turn things around. I didn't know how And certainly God wasn't even a factor in this decision at that point. It was just, hey, she's right. I've been successful at professional things, work ethic, discipline, character. I could put those things in my life and I could fix this. And so it was really just a self-will kind of thing. But I did know this. I knew I couldn't do it alone, and I knew I couldn't do it with the people I'd surrounded myself by. I needed some real accountability in my life. And so I asked her, is there someone at this church you're going to that could step into this situation, some man that could help hold me accountable to this decision? And she introduced me to a man named Steve Toth. Steve was just an elder on call at the church. He wasn't an MMA fighter. He wasn't a 4th Recon Marine. He wasn't a Navy SEAL or anything else. Like, he owned a local business, and he would just happen to be on call. But he had the perfect gift to help me. He has ADD, like really bad. I mean, seriously, like if you go eat lunch with Steve, like he doesn't walk to his car, he runs because walking's like a waste of time. Like he's like so impatient. And the reason this was a gift for me, it's so true about him. Like the reason it's a gift is because I was so manipulative. Like I would have said all the right things. I was prepared to say all the right things. I wasn't meeting with him to counsel me. I was meeting with him to manipulate him into getting my wife back. That's why I was meeting with him. In fact, I wrote a op order, those in the military, a 5-paragraph order of how I was going to fix my life. It was really good, by the way. And I slid it over to him, and I'm like, hey, check this out. And he put his hand on that thing and slid it back over to me and told me I was going to fail. I was ticked. I was like, who is this guy? Like I took my time. That's the arrogance in me, right? I took my time to meet with this guy, and I wrote this paper, and he's not even going to look at it. Show it to my wife. That's kind of how it was. I was trying to control the situation. He didn't even look at it. I remember him doing this. As he slid it back over to me, he tapped in the paper with his finger, and he said, if this thing doesn't have anything to do with your relationship with God, I'm not going to waste your time, and I'm not going to let you waste mine. That's exactly what I needed to hear. You see, I had tried everything. I tried the pills. I tried the counseling. I tried the MMA and jiu-jitsu. None of those things worked. You talk about resiliency, military resiliency, mind, body, spirit, social. I was mentally tough, physically tough. I had a good social network. That spiritual piece was missing, and I knew it. Deep down inside me, I knew it. We have a saying at our foundation, in Mighty Oaks, and the work that we do with our veterans, if what you're doing isn't working, then why not try something different? Right? If what you're doing isn't working, why not try something different? Everything I had tried didn't work. It was time for me to try something different. And so I said, you know what? I have nothing to lose. I'm going to trust this man, and I surrender my life to Christ. Amen. To be honest with you, at that time, I didn't really even know what that meant. I just knew that nothing else had worked. And so I surrendered and just said, God, whatever, if you're real, whatever this is, change my heart. I want to feel again. I want to be able to live the life that you have in store for me. I didn't know what it meant, but I knew I needed to. Something inside of me seen something in this man, Steve, and I'm like, whatever he has, if I could just, like whatever this man has, like the joy he has, the confidence he has, if I could just get 10 seconds of that, I don't ever want to let that go. I wanted what he had. And beyond that decision, Steve mentored me for an entire year in biblical manhood, and my life was radically changed. What I discovered through that process, what may seem so simple to some of you, but to me was so profound. I discovered that all these things that happened in my life, my childhood, like losing my brother or losing, this man I have in my hand here, my best friend, Foster Harrington, we served together for 10 years. Our first deployment, he was killed a month into that deployment. Like losing him, like losing those other teammates in Afghanistan. All these bad things that happened to me, as bad as those things were, and some of them were horrific, as bad as some of those things were, those things did not lead me to be in that closet with a pistol in my hand. Where it led me there were the choices I made in response to those things. And I never lost the ability to choose. And as cliche as it may seem, I realized I didn't have to let my past define my future. I could choose a different future moving forward. Paul says it like this in the book of Philippians. He says, I don't have it all figured out, but one thing I do know is this. I need to forget the past so I can strain forward to what lies ahead. I need to forget the past so I can strain forward to what lies ahead, because God had a plan and a purpose and a future for me, and I had to make a decision to step off the X in my life and step into the very life he created me to live. And when I did that, I found restoration for the first time in a long time in our marriage, in my family, restoration in the brokenness in my life that came way before Afghanistan. I found hope, again for the first time in a long time. I found a passion to live again. And I found, I think, what I sought my whole life for, and what every man in this room seeks every day of their life, and that's purpose. Why? Because we were created to have purpose. When you don't have purpose in your life, you will wither up and die. You need to wake up every day and know that there's a mission for you. You were wired that way. You were created by God that way. That's sown inside of you to have purpose. And when I felt like I had purpose again, a fire was lit inside of me. Mark Twain says it like this: the two most important days in a person's life are the day that they're born and the day they find out why. When Steve Toth, and think about that, the day we were born and the day we find out why, the two most important days in our life. When Steve Toth introduced me to the life that I was created to live, that's when I discovered the why. And honestly, it's to be here today and share some of my experiences that I've learned in my life with others, because I know that the things that I've struggled with is, as Stu Weber says, is somewhere in the chest of every man that we know. We all struggle with the same things, but the way forward is the same. And when we discovered this, when my wife and I discovered this for ourselves, it was like if we were dying of cancer and Steve gave us the cure, we didn't want to share it. I felt an overwhelming obligation to share it. And so was birthed the call in our heart by God to share what we discovered with through Mighty Oaks Foundation. I'll be honest, when we felt called by God to share what we discovered through Mighty Oaks, we were in no business. We had no place starting a ministry. We had been living back in the same house for a year. We were still bleeding as a couple, still trying to put the pieces back together. I was still winning her back. I was still recalibrating my life and my marriage. But we knew we wasn't qualified. We didn't even know if we wanted to. We certainly didn't have the experience, but we felt we had to be obedient to. Just like Moses. Again, I don't think Moses felt qualified or he didn't feel like he probably wanted to, but he was obedient. And Kathy and I was obedient to do that call. And I'm so thankful that while we didn't know how to do it, God did, and he orchestrated the most amazing team of people and staff members, and from our board of directors to our team and to our supporters. It's just such an incredible work that God's brought together. And here it is, 10 years later, and I've been able to speak to over 120,000 active duty troops on bases around the world by invitation of the military to talk about spiritual resiliency, that piece that I didn't understand. The Marine Corps lets me go to Marine Corps boot camp every quarter for 4 years now and talk to those brand new recruits right when they're learning how to be warriors, that they don't have to trade their masculinity for their Christianity. They could be men of God and be the most incredible warriors in the battlefield. We get to do that. Why? Because simply I stepped off the X in my own life and stepped into the very life and plan that God had for me. And beyond that resiliency and being able to talk to troops and giving away these books on bases and stuff like that, we took the mentorship that Steve gave me. We put in a 1-week program. It took me a year, but everyone else takes a week. I'm just a hard case, right? Actually, it's more than a week. They come for a week intensive, but we were with them for the rest of their life. But we do 30 weeks per year, 31-week camps per year. We have ranches in Colorado, Virginia, Ohio, and Texas, and we pay for everything on active duty, veterans, spouses, and now we do first responders. And the military sends them on orders to us or from the veteran community, and we pay for them to go there. We even cover their travel, so we fly them wherever they are. And so you need to know if you're a veteran here or just a member of a community, grab a flyer in the back, because the programs are for, the reason I come to speak at churches like this is not just to share God's message to you, but to know that as a community, you have a resource for veterans that are in your community and first responders in your community, a free resource that we will point them to the solution to this problem. And by the way, we've had 2,750 graduates from that program. And this year, this will be our first year, we're going to do 1,000 this year. And moving forward, that's what we're going to do. And God's just absolutely amazing when we simply get out of his way, be obedient to what he calls us to do, and step off the axis of our own life and into the lives that he created us to live. Guys, God's promise of hope and restoration is not, I know I talk a lot about the military, but it's not reserved for the military. God's promise of hope and restoration is not just for the Israelites. It's for each and every one of us. There's a million ways in this world that we could be hurt, that we could get off track, that we could lose our purpose, but I'm convinced there's only one way to get well. There's only one way to get on track. There's only one way to find our purpose, and that's through a relationship with Jesus Christ. Life is hard, guys. Whether you're in the military or not, life is hard. And we're all going to find ourselves on the X from time to time. But when you do, you have to know, regardless of the circumstances, regardless how dark it may seem, God has a plan and purpose for your life. And it's a good one. Whatever the X is in your life, whether it's a traumatic event or a struggle, or maybe a struggle with like anger or fear or selfishness or laziness, an addiction, the depression or lack of purpose in your life, whatever it is, you have to know God has a plan and purpose for you. Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you a hope and a future. That's for you. That's for each of us. And sometimes I pray that promise will lead you to your knees in prayer. And other times I pray it gives you the very faith you need to get up and move forward. Can I pray with you, man? Lord, I thank you so much for, I just look out at this, Lord, to see all these men that would give up their Friday night, not to come and hear my story, Lord, but to come and hear your story through mine and Kathy's life, a story that's available for each of us. Should we choose to step off the exit in our life, Lord, into the very lives you created us to live? Lord, I think you didn't just create us, Lord, but you created us for a purpose. I pray each and every man here will step into that purpose, Lord. They'll step into that purpose and find ultimately what they're looking for the fulfillment and joy that they seek for every day in their life. The hole that feels like many of these men in this room, I know, Lord, many of the men in this room feel like something's missing in their life, a hole, something they can't put their finger on, that something's missing, that purpose in their life. They'll understand that purpose is available for them, that you created them for it. But more than anything, Lord, that they understand that finding that purpose starts with a relationship with you. We will never understand who we're created to be unless we have a relationship with our Creator, you, Jesus. And I pray for each man here that they will discover that. If they have not already, that tonight will be their night. That these men will rise up and not just to be Christians, Lord, but to be world changers, Lord, to be kingdom builders, and to do exactly what you've intended them to do with their life. I thank you for that in advance, Lord. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you. Thank you, man, so much. Thank you.